I knew the summer we packed for Camp Redwood would be the last one I ever trusted my husband. My name is Laura Benson. I'm 52, mother to two bright girls, and married to a man I thought I knew. It began when he was making copies of our passports. He dropped one on the floor. I bent to pick it up. His eyes flickered with something I didn't recognize. We arrived at Camp Redwood in late June. Days were golden, laughter echoing by the lake. Nights smelled of pine and barbecue smoke. It was idyllic until Dad got a phone call. He answered in the van about 3 rings past dinner. His face went white. He said, "Yes, I'll be right back." He stepped outside and talked for nearly an hour. I heard his voice echoing through the mesh tent flaps. He returned, smiling, but his hands shook. I didn't ask. I didn't want him to lie. By the 4th day, Dad's phone calls increased. He'd rise before dawn and talk behind the trees. He refused to tell us who called. When Charlotte asked why he was whispering into his phone, he said, "Wolves sleep lightly here." That night, he heard something scratched outside our tent. He woke me. I told him nothing's in the woods but deer. He nodded, but I saw he believed another answer. On day 5, I found a photo on my pillow of me sleeping with the girls. Underneath, Dad had written in faded ink, "Stay with me forever." I confronted him at breakfast. He gave me a stiff look and said, "What's real and what's memory? Let's go for a hike." We left the girls with their coloring books and packed, but instead of heading to the forest trail, he drove us to a narrow road leading nowhere. The station wasn't far, but there was no one else, just a dead-end lot with old chain-link gates. He parked. The engine idled as if waiting. I opened my mouth, but then the phone rang again. That call. He answered. A woman's voice asked, "Did she see?" He didn't speak. After the call, he stared at the chain-link fence, as if seeing through it into someone else's world. We left. I asked where we were going. He said, "Another campground." Now. I looked at the girls in the rearview mirror. Their smiles were forced. I realized then we weren't safe until we were far from the silence he carried. It rained the next day, storms heavy as guilt. He stayed in the tent with the phone pressed to his ear, swaying. I tried to touch him. He flinched away. The calls punctuated the thunder. I couldn't follow the reasons on his face, only the fear. The evenings grew colder. My husband's eyes looked into darkness that wasn't there. When I pressed him at dinner, he said he made promises, that he couldn't break them. I felt a small knot in the pit of my stomach. On the last night, thunder rolled across the lake. I tucked my daughters in and descended to the tent door. He was gone. The children twisted between us, half sleeping, their pillows pressed to their cheeks. I panicked-headed into the campground. I found him by the fountain near the lakeside cabins. He stood perfectly still in the rain, staring at his reflection in the water face blank, lips parted, eyes shimmering with remorse. A woman's voice followed me from the tent. "He's been waiting for you." My heart froze. I didn't turn. I knew it wasn't my best friend who stayed back with the girls. He knelt and whispered to the water. "She'll understand." He turned and looked at me. I expected mercy. Instead, I saw someone else. The phone was in his hand. He whispered 2 words, "Cemetery visitor." I asked what that meant. He shook his head, turned away, walked to the van. I followed. I saw my daughters asleep inside the van. Inside was an album, full of photos, women I'd never met, standing in the chains of the chain-link lot. All shaved heads, empty eyes, their names marked, some unreadable. I slammed it shut, felt bile rise in my throat. Then he spoke. "They told me to keep smiling, sweetheart. They say it's easier that way." I realized then they weren't stray calls. They were summons. They were warnings. Promises I didn't know he'd made. When I looked at his face, I didn't recognize him anymore, and then the phone buzzed again. This time I answered. A man whispered, "She found you." It was a voice I knew, my father's. My father died 20 years ago. I dropped the phone. My husband lunged forward. I grabbed the girls and ran. I left him with the phone in his hand, his eyes flickering two ways. One memory, one horror I couldn't hold. At the roadside, we flagged down strangers. The police came. They found us trembling by the wayside, soaked and shaking. They searched the tent and the van. Found nothing, just normal camping gear and a trail of muddy footsteps circling the site. No album, no phone. Maybe everything erased by him. They questioned us all night. My husband didn't speak to me. He only stared at empty air, occasionally squeezing his eyes shut. The officers left at dawn, saying our testimonies didn't add up. They told me to return home with the children and start anew. On the drive back, I felt his hand brush mine. Warm fingers with no warmth inside. I dropped off the girls at school the next day, kissed their heads and gave them a story about summer camps and mosquitoes. That night, my phone lit with a picture message from his number. It showed an empty tent, chain-link gate wide open, muddy marks on the tent flap, and overlaid in chalk-white letters, "I kept my promise." I called him. His voicemail recorded my breathing. I locked my door. I laid in bed, listening to silence, and I realized the horror wasn't his secret life. It was mine, because I married a man who kept secrets for a reason, and now those secrets were coming for me.